People worry a little too much about the fine details of their podcast when they are brand new to social media, the podcasting space, and really what will move their podcast forward the most is becoming a better host. Doesn't matter if it's a solo podcast, co-hosted, you have guests on your show. Like if you're brand new, you probably suck, and that's okay. That's where we all start. But the more you do it, the less you're going to suck and the more people are going to want to listen. So I think too many people are way too worried about, oh, how should my intro be? How should my outro be? What should I name it? Like, are those important? Totally. But there's no replacement for you becoming a better host. Because I think a lot of people, they want to be perfect out of the gate with their setup, their name and all that. And it's like, just get started.
Hello, sales journeyman. I want to ask you a quick question, okay? And I want you to think with me for a second. Think about your favorite actor, actress. Think about your favorite musician, politician, influencer, whoever it is. I want you to get them picture in your mind. If they called you on a sales call, would you hang up on them? I want you to think. Imagine Brad Pitt is calling you, right? Brad Pitt's one of my favorite actors. Would you just go, oh, I'm not interested, and shut the phone down? I'm willing to bet probably not. And why is that? Because these influencers, these actors, these politicians, these business influencers, whoever they are, they have notoriety. They have attention. They have a sense of fame. You're familiar with them. And that is why it is so important, I believe, no matter what industry you're in, to create content. Because whatever you can do to build your familiarity with your audience is going to warm up the market. So if you have an opportunity to cold call them or do whatever, it's no longer really a cold call because you're building your name. So our guest today is Skylar Bytendorp. He's got his own school community called Real Podcasters. He helps business owners and anyone really looking to start a podcast and start that content generation, really help them achieve the results they want, get their message out there, build an audience for them. Skylar, thank you so much for joining us.
Anytime, Robert. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So Skylar, I want to ask you a question kind of more geared towards sales, but before we get into that, kind of want to ask a little bit about yourself. What got you really into the podcasting industry and how did you really get your start?
Yeah, it's a funny story. I cleaned windows as my own business for about 10 years. And over those 10 years, I listened to a lot of podcasts and eventually just found myself asking the same questions that the hosts were asking on their show. And so, or that they were asking their guests on their show. And so I started to have this idea in my mind, like, oh, maybe I should start a podcast. Like I'm just naturally thinking of, the good questions to ask, and eventually bought all the equipment, did all the, months of research on what equipment to buy and bought the equipment. It sat in my, closet for probably a month or two. Had a buddy that was like, hey, I want to start one too. So we started one together. It was decent. He moved away, started my own. It sucked. Hired a coach and took a course on podcasting and, really learned the ins and outs. Then I relaunched my podcast and rebranded and everything. It did probably 10 times better than it had before. And from there, I just started having, the guests I had on or friends or people that were seeing me do this podcast asking me, how can you start a podcast? And anyway, so that's how I got started. And that's how I also got started in helping other people create their podcasts and be successful with them, because it was honestly just an accidental thing. But yeah, that's where I got started and been doing it for the last 4 or 5 years.
Awesome. Good to hear. Definitely glad to have you. You have a really great school community. You guys have doing a lot of stuff to kind of help train people. I want to ask, because I think a lot of people, myself included, when it comes to starting a podcast, a lot of people don't know where to start. Kind of talk to the person who maybe, is just kind of wondering, like, where should I start? Should I go only with sales content? Maybe I'm interested in football, like how should people really kind of get started with their podcast? What things are really essential?
I think it's essential to, it's like, so a good podcast is like a puzzle, and there's a lot of little pieces to it to make it complete and to make it really work. If you have the wrong pieces trying to put them together, it's just, you'll have something that is just not as good as you hoped it could be and not as nice sounding looking as you hope. So I think the best place to start is with anything with the end in mind. Like, what is the goal with your podcast? I think that's number one. Is your goal just to have fun? Then if your goal is really just to have fun and to, maybe you're doing it with your friends, then there's really no rules. You should just start doing your podcast, call it whatever, because there's no goal. But if your goal is to monetize, or your goal is to, get people on sales calls, or get people into your coaching program, or into your, your online community, or to walk into your business, then you're going to want to be a little more strategic with who you interview, what you talk about, how you name them, who you interact with on social media. You can really build the foundation of your podcast once you understand what the end is and what your goal is with the podcast. Now, everyone I talk to says, "Oh, I want to make money with it somehow." And even the people, it's funny because a lot of people, I'll ask, "Oh, what's your goal with your podcast?" And they'll first say, "Oh, I just want to, have fun with it." And I was like, "Okay, well, let's say you had a magic wand and you could just fling it, and your podcast, in a year from now would be doing exactly what you wanted it to be." Every answer I get is, "Oh, well, I want to get a sponsorship or make money or do something like that." And it's like, okay, since that is your real, true, authentic answer on, what you want to happen, then let's really dial it in. But anyway, to get started, I think you really just got to pick a goal and what you really want out of it, because that will set you on the right trajectory to accomplish your goals.
And that makes a ton of sense. And, I think about that a lot for sales individuals, even when you're starting your calls or when you're starting your outreach, right? Like knowing what we're building to. So I'm a big fan of like Jordan Belfort's straight line model of selling, right? There's all these different sales methodologies out there. They're all out there. But that was really the first one I got on board with, because it really kind of helped me know what checkpoints were like. Okay, I start the call with an open, I start here. And it's kind of the same thing for this podcast as well that I've started. We're a pretty small podcast at this time, but my real goal was always like, I know what it's like to be a sales rep. I know what it's like to be suffering when you can't close deals. I know what it's like to go through this trainer and that trainer and trying to find a place where you can actually learn something. And I really want to be that place, because I'm still actively selling. A lot of these guys aren't doing that right now. And so that was kind of like, for me, like really the goal for this podcast was really to be for sales reps and for entrepreneurs that are just trying to kind of get that going. I think that's really great advice. How much weight should someone really put upon technology as far as investing? Like, do you really need to have like a full setup, or is it, if you got a camera, you got a microphone, you got a light, is that good to go? Like, how should people kind of measure that out as far as how much money they're going to pump into production?
Yeah. I would say it should be a percentage of like how much money you currently make, or, if this is connected to a business and your business has funds, then yeah, you should do it at the highest level that your budget allows. And if it's something that you're like, okay, I have a high budget, but I don't know exactly if I want to do a podcast, I just kind of want to dip my toe in and see if I really like it, then really you should just start with your phone and some cheap microphones. Just start easy. Or you can rent a podcast studio. Most cities have a podcast studio in it, and it's so much cheaper. It doesn't sound like it, but it is so much cheaper, and you're going to get a much higher quality of a podcast by just renting a studio. Most studios you can rent for multiple years, like 2-3 years, before it would make more sense to build your own and to invest the money, plus the technical support they give you. But if someone's just starting, it's just like, let's just start with, where you're at. If you got a lot of money and like you got multi-millions of dollars just sitting in the bank account, okay, let's build you a $50,000 podcast studio set. If you're doing less than that, or you just want to rent, or you don't want to worry about the hassle, then rent a studio. But if you're just like the hobbyist, you're just starting your business, start with your phone. You can buy some cheap microphones off of Amazon for 50, maybe $100. Connect it to your phone, set up your phone on a tripod, and just start recording. There's no replacement for volume and for just getting started. Like once you start getting the reps in, you're going to really realize what this can do for you, how many opportunities come up once you start a podcast, and who you can meet, that you're going to start to get a lot out of it, and you're going to want to start putting more into it so you can get more out of it. But the highest level you possibly can with the budget you have is the short answer.
Yeah, that's definitely solid advice for sure. Because I think like, you kind of have like two schools of thought with some people. Some people are perfectionists and they want everything to be like to the T, like the lighting and all that stuff. And I definitely think as you get higher level, you get more viewers, you want to get there. But I've always been a big fan of like Gary Vaynerchuk, where it's like, yeah, just get an effing microphone and just, and power
Yeah.
through it. And I've always appreciated that. So let's say we have a person, right? They're coming to you for coaching. They're looking to you. They've got, a basic setup, right? Maybe they're renting a studio. Maybe they've got some microphones, some lights, some things. Maybe they're doing it on their phone. What would be like some check marks of strategy to really grow the audience? Is it just posting shorts on like YouTube and TikTok with links? What are some steps people can take from going from, let's say, 0 viewers, 0 listeners to their first 100, and then maybe to their first 1,000, and then maybe to 10,000? And then after that, I think it's a matter of, really putting some serious financial investing in to kind of get your name out there.
Yeah. So any product or service you create, you can only sell it to the people that actually know it exists, which is, where, door to door sales, selling on social media, phone calls, like you can only sell to people that actually are aware that they can buy from you. Everyone else will never buy from you because they don't know it exists. It's the same with a podcast. You're creating a service in a way because you're, adding value to people. It's a way to market, right? And so if you have the best podcast in the world and you just put it on YouTube, on Apple, on Spotify, but you do no social media clips, you don't collaborate with your guests, you don't tell anybody, you don't wear the hat around or the shirt or whatever with the podcast logo on it, no one's gonna know. And so you'll get 0 listens, even though it's maybe a like phenomenally like produced podcast. So if you want 1,000 listeners, one, your podcast doesn't need to be worth listening to, and that's a whole conversation on how to make it so people like want to listen and want to keep coming back. But if people like you said, like if they just have their basic setup, they've started, it's like, how do we get from that 0 to their first 100? It's post reels and make sure you have a link for people to click in order to listen to your podcast on the different platforms. There are ways to have just a single link that will go to the podcast platform based off their device. And so I try to use one of those tools and post clips as many as I can without annoying the audience. There's also a strategic way I think to do that. And yeah, you'll have more people essentially buy from you or listen to your podcast based off of, how many clips and reels and how much marketing you do for it.
Yeah. No, it's great advice. I think it's like kind of reminds me of a lot of things Alex Hormozy says. It's like one of his like tried and true sayings is, in order to grow, you do so much volume that it just doesn't make sense for anything else but to grow.
Mhm.
I've always taken that into my own sales career and even into this podcast. Is like just post as many times per day as you can, and and as many platforms as you can. Is there like any platform in particular, social media wise, that you see has the best results? Like I noticed, like my numbers do better on shorts on YouTube than on Instagram or even TikTok. What are your thoughts as far as like platform posting?
Yeah, I think with anything, it's hard to give a general answer because it totally depends on, what's the podcast about, how old are you, how, the type of audience. But I would say in general, I think everyone should be on Instagram and YouTube. I think if you're only picking two, that is probably the two I would recommend, because YouTube is going to be where you're going to make the most money off of your podcast as far as ads and just generating money just solely based off the content. A lot of people are on Instagram too. It seems like everyone has an Instagram account, and then everyone will have maybe a TikTok or a Facebook. Maybe they're on like X or Threads as well, but it seems like the majority of people are on like YouTube and Instagram. So I would start there, but I do think it's important to pick one platform to get really good at, because any one of those platforms is going to have all the listeners and all the potential buyers that you need. But if you're not going all in on a single platform, then you're probably not going to reach them. So I'd pick one, but it's okay to also post to all of them, but only invest a lot of time to one, which a social media tool, like scheduling tool, would come into play. But yeah, does that answer your question?
No, I think that's a great
Oh,
answer, because I think for us, like I post everywhere to like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, and I'm just kind of measuring like kind of where it's at. Obviously talking kind of about my own podcast as far as that goes, but I definitely think you're right on that. I think Instagram and YouTube just has a greater audience for reels. Like on Facebook, there's too much
mhm.
variety. Like people are fighting their statuses still, and it's a much older audience, I think. Whereas like I feel like Instagram is more for older versions of reels, right? Like TikTok is kind of like a little bit still very younger, I would say, fan base of what they're watching. It's a lot more about like fun and funny, not so much serious. Whereas I think Instagram is much more serious and YouTube is kind of right on par with that. I think that's solid for more of like a sales related podcast. Now, if you are talking about Naruto, or you're talking about,
Right.
the NFL, or you're making jokes, I think TikTok is probably going to have a lot better results. You mentioned something I want to talk about, and I think it goes back to the first thing we talked about of having your end goal in mind, right? You mentioned creating a podcast that's worth listening to. What strategies, what organization methods, what ways can people really kind of sit down in their pre-planning for their podcast and really map out a podcast that's going to be worth listening to? So that way that quality kind of stays in the mind of the listener and gets them to kind of look out for that next episode and the episode after that and creates that following.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I think you gotta decide, who are you talking to? Who are you helping? Because if you know who you're talking to and what problem you're helping them with, then we know what to call the podcast and what to call the episodes and what to talk about in the episodes, what questions to ask our guests in the episodes. For example, I was talking to entrepreneurs who had just started their business and were still working on getting to $10,000 a month. Well, that helped me to name the podcast, and then that also helped me to name the episodes, and
Mm,
also what kind of guests am I having on and what kind of questions am I asking those guests. So to put it really simply, a podcast, at least how I did it, is my podcast answers a question. And that question is how to make 10 grand a month in your business.
mm,
And every episode answers a question within that question. So maybe it's how to set up your business legally. So we'll do a full episode on here's how to set up your LLC, here's how to set up your bank account, here's how to pick your name, and what should you start tracking in your business right off the gate. So that's like one episode because everyone needs to know how to do that, but it's not answering that full question. Because if you try to answer too many questions in one episode, then the whole episode's a little vague and you don't really get into depth. But then if you do I did another episode like on SEO, for example. We went very deep with this guy who knew SEO really well, and he was doing six figures plus in his. I think he was doing actually like half a million, like maybe $1 million a year in his business. But he was just talking about like, here's how to do SEO. Here is the tips you want to do for social media, for your website. They're called, yeah. He gave a lot of examples, but essentially, you want your podcast to answer one question and to solve a problem for your listener, and then those episodes need to go deep into one particular question within that question. And so
mm,
it's going to get people addicted because it's like, oh, okay, how do I get another 20% uh, people in my door through social media, and
mm,
going deep into like social media strategies. And so when you look at it that way, you're really helping a specific person that is just going to start getting addicted to your podcast because they just like every episode is like, oh man, this is a whole piece of the puzzle I did not have yet, but now I
mm,
have it. What's the next piece? Instead of a generic, I'm interviewing a business owner. How did you start? What were some of your hurdles? What do you do? It's not that that's anything wrong with that, but it's just not as helpful it doesn't help solve the problem as fast as saying, okay, what specifically do I need to do to have my business rank number one on Google and get more people to buy that way? Like that is extremely valuable to a lot of businesses versus a story on how someone got to six figures or more. That's a big part of it. But like I said, there's a lot of pieces to the podcast. But I think if people just did that, they would do so much better.
yeah. I think a lot of what you're saying too, I can even tie it down. I believe sales is in everything, right? Everything is kind of a sales, whether it's selling, listening to your podcast, whether it's selling, recruiting someone to your agency, whether it's, getting your kid to put down the soda can because he just wants to keep drinking soda and you got to give him a
Yeah,
motivation. I think you said a lot there that really coordinates with a lot of what we talk about on this podcast. He mentioned, guys, he mentioned, know your listener. And that's what I would phrase as customer avatar, right? Understand the end customer. Who is your ideal customer? Solving problems. Some people, when I first started selling and I would go to kind of try to like start pitching. I sold a lot of commodities in the past, so it wasn't a lot of pitching, but then I got into the sales field that really required a lot of education. I would try to hit everybody with everything but the kitchen sink, like every single thing, every single
yeah,
item. And it didn't work. And to think that, and I learned to just simplify it to maybe one, two, maybe three things at most. And after doing that, I just saw my pitches get so much more attention. And the same thing applies to content. If you're talking about seven different things, you can't solve everyone's problem all at once. It's just the reality.
absolutely. Yeah.
So talking kind of about, general kind of podcasting, we talked about, what people should kind of expect of how to get started. We talked about kind of how to create a podcast people want to listen to. In your experience, what are some of the most common mistakes you see from anyone trying to start a podcast? What are like the mistakes that like really just kind of pigeonhole people in their career and in their podcast that are just most common?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is people worry too much about the okay, so I'm going to kind of contradict myself a little bit here, but people worry a little too much about the fine details of their podcast when they are brand new to social media, the podcasting space, and really what will move their podcast forward the most is becoming a better host. Doesn't matter if it's a solo podcast, co-hosted, you have guests on your show, like if you're brand new, you probably suck. And that's okay. That's where we all start. But the more you do it, the less you're going to suck and the more people are going to want to listen. So I think too many people are way too worried about, oh, how should my intro be? How should my outro be? What should I name it? Like, are those important? Totally. But there's no replacement for you becoming a better host. Because and I think a lot of people, they want to be perfect out of the gate with their setup, their name, and all that. And it's like, just get started. Start with what you got, what you have, what's available to you, and just start learning. Because there's so many people that, at least that I've worked with, that start their podcast talking about one thing with a certain name, but then 6 months later they're like, man, I'm really understanding now what I like to talk about, how I like to talk about it, what direction I want to go, how I could monetize this. And so they really understand where they want to go. They get some direction after a few months. So I think the best thing for anybody is just start and get it going, because worrying about those fine details that you will likely change later is really going to hold you back and pigeonhole you, like you said.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely true. And that's the thing too. It's like there's so many people who are perfectionists that want everything, like you said, to be perfect. They want to have all their research available. I had a friend that was doing decent at closing deals, relating podcasting kind of back to sales, but like he just wasn't closing as much as like I was closing. He's like, what? What? I was like, he was like, why? I was like, I don't understand. Like, I'm better than you at presenting. I'm better than you at all these things. And he was sincerely better than me at a lot of things. And I was like, hey, well, let me sit with you for an hour and figure out your process. This guy would take, before every single call, he would take 15 to 20 minutes to research every single thing about the customer. And a lot of people say, well, research is king. And I agree. If you're going after opportunities that are worth millions of dollars, yeah. But if you're selling a 10 grand item, an annual year, 20 grand, 30 grand, most of the things that you could learn through research, you could also learn by having a conversation with a person. So it's like, again, like you're trying to be so perfect because you don't want to look silly. Whereas if you just got on the phone and got hung up on 2 times, but then by your third time, you're having a conversation and you're having 4 conversations an hour, you're going to outgrow everybody else. And it sounds like what you're saying is the same thing is kind of similar in the podcast realm. It's like you're trying to have all the graphics done right and all the thumbnails done right and all this stuff in order. Whereas the person who's already put out 10 episodes has already learned, improved, and adjusted and can now make a better show.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So kind of going into kind of more so for content for business people, you've obviously done a lot in the business space. I think one of the biggest challenges that I have right now, and this is kind of a selfish question for me, is getting good guests and getting solid guests. I've learned that a lot of people that you would think would want to be on a podcast really don't want to be on a podcast. I've gone on LinkedIn and been like, hey, do you want to be on a podcast? I probably asked over like 200 people and I think I've had like 8 people come on the show. What are
Wow.
some tactics people can do to get people that have good quality opinions, good quality perspectives, maybe even something of a name brand? We're probably not going to get Ed Milet or Gary Vaynerchuk in our first couple episodes. What are some tactics people can do to get those better guests so that way they can start kind of building some clout and kind of take even some of their clout and bring it to their show?
Yeah. And from my experience, a lot of people, when you ask them to be on a podcast, they are going to look up your podcast on social media. They're maybe going to listen to an episode before they say, yes, I will be on. They're also going to look at your profile picture. They're going to look at your bio. They're going to look at the content you repost, and they're going to decide, is associating with this person going to be either, is it going to hurt my personal brand? Is it going to do anything for my personal brand? Like maybe they're cool, but maybe there's just like, they're not promoting it. They're not really doing much, what am I going to be on the episode? And then that's it. They're not going to create any reels. They're not going to make me look and sound amazing. So I think people will look at those 2 things, or they're going to look at your social media and the podcast and the reels and everything that, like, how much you promote each episode and how good you make people look. And they're going to say, yes, please, I would love to be on your podcast. We can do it tonight, tomorrow, whenever. I think it helps a lot when your profile picture looks like someone they want to associate with, when the content you're posting is like, yeah, right in line with what they're doing. And then a big part is, if you are, let's say you have an hour-long episode and you grab 8 reels from it, If you are posting those reels consistently and you always have a new one coming up on your feed and you're collaborating with those people, and if it's something that makes your guest look and sound like the expert, like the pro, like the coolest person in the world, they're going to want to be on your podcast because of how much it benefits them. When they get on a podcast and the benefit all goes to the podcast host, not to the guest, then there's a lot less of a desire to come on. But if you were asked to be on some Joe Schmo's, some homeless guy's podcast, you're probably gonna be like, that's not really gonna help
Oh,
me.
right.
That's gonna be a weird conversation. But if Ed Milet asks you to be on, you're gonna say yes. When? In 30 minutes. You said, I will drop everything. I'll make it happen, right? Because of how much it's gonna do for you with your credibility and how much it's gonna help build your personal brand. So I think that's one thing, is like, try to make yourself look as, stay authentic and stay real, but look as good as you can on social media and promote the episodes as much as you can on social media, so that way people are dying to come on or even willing to pay to be on your episodes. So that's one big thing. Yeah, I'll leave it there. That was kind of a long answer.
No, I think that's really good. I think that's really solid. I think and that's actually even convicting to me, because I know that I still have some shorts in the chamber that I should be sharing that maybe would be beneficial. So that's actually solid, super solid advice and super good. Again, I see it in everything we're talking about. I just see the correlation between just good sales principles and good podcast principles are the same, benefit for the listener, benefit to the person who's on the podcast, making them look good, improving their lives as a whole. I really think I think that's just super solid. I'm gonna definitely implement that over the next couple of months. That's some free coaching there. And
Right on.
speaking of coaching, when it comes to coaching, I mean, aside from yourself, because you obviously have great coaching when it comes to podcasting, but what should people be looking for if they want to hire a coach for like a podcast or even for sales or for whatever it is? Like, what qualities do you see, like, as far as like kind of your own offering as far as coaching, but also other coaching offers if people really want to get into that space?
Yeah, dude. I think coaching is it's really saturated, as you know, and everyone wants to be a coach, and because everyone wants to be seen as the expert, the smart person that can help you achieve everything you've ever wanted to. And there's a lot of phonies out there, but people are really good at faking it on social media. There's someone I know, and they have been struggling as a coach, at least as far as it sees, like as I could see. They just seem to have been in the same place for like 4 or 5 years, and I think it's because they don't have the credibility to back up their coaching, and so they get clients, right? Because some people, I don't want to say fall for it, but some people are willing to just take what they do have to offer and that they're good with that. And I'm sure they help them a lot, but I think a lot of people want to see like wild success from their coach. Like if people are looking at your social media and they can tell you've been in the game for 4, 5, 10 years, and you're like, I mean, I think showing the house and the car, I'm sure like some people are going to vibe with that and be like, okay, this guy's legit, but this still, you can fake those things. But I think people, I think as far as trying to find a coach, like just do some research, like really see like what does this person have testimonials? What are the guarantees they're what do they charge? Like I just barely paid someone to help me, with build a software. Once after I paid them, it was like everything just kind of flipped, like on what they were going to deliver for me. I'm glad I bought, and the big reason I bought is because they had a 30-day guarantee that they would refund it if it wasn't, things. And so I got my money back. But I think coaches that are legit aren't going to be afraid to give you your money back because they're confident in what they can do for you. But yeah, it's tough. Like I wish I had a better answer to how to find a good coach, but I think just look for people who actually have done it full time for a long time. And I think sometimes it's the people who aren't trying to be coaches that may end up being your best coach because they're just too busy winning that they don't have busy time to help you win. But if you can convince them to help you win, then man, that's probably the type of coach I would want.
No, I think you said it very well. And I think it's like if I see another broccoli haired 20-year-old talking about how they have 10 years experience closing
Man.
deals, I'm literally going to lose my mind.
Yeah.
It's like you get all these young guys who, like, instead of trying to actually kill a lion and bring a lion to the table and bring a feast to everyone, it's like, brother, you're almost young enough to be my kid, like in a different world. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm sure that you're good. I'm sure that you have experience. I'm sure that you've read, some Tony Robbins. But to think that like you're gonna like teach like me the secret of high ticket closing and we're gonna do this and I think it's a little bit insane.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and that's just kind of just the state of coaching kind of as it stands as of today. So kind of in kind of want to get to ask you some questions a little bit more about yourself. I mean, when it comes to podcasts and you think like, man, this is like the creme de la creme of podcasts. What podcast do you look at and that inspire you to be like, I kind of want to be more like this person or this podcast that people can listen to?
Yeah, there's a handful of podcasts I listen to. And funny enough, the more the longer I've been in my podcast business and helping produce shows for, hundreds of people, I've listened to less because I think just at work, I'm constantly listening to them. But podcasts that I want to be more like, or that I kind of look up to and try to emulate, not just in the production studio, but also just like for myself and how I do it, is there's one called, have you listened to Dropping Bombs?
Yes.
Okay. Some people don't like Brad Lee. I like him. I think he's got a lot of great advice, but I think just the way he's able to just throw his I don't know how to say it. Like he just brings his whole personality out and isn't afraid to be himself, isn't afraid to offend people, and just kind of says things as they are. He calls himself the real Brad Lee, and I think that's true. I think he is very real. So in that sense, I think he's doing really good, but I think his production is not as high as it could be for someone who's doing as well as he is. And I know he just updated his podcast studio set, which I think was a good thing. It Yeah. Anyway, so that's one, but mostly just because I think the host does a really good job.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen, let's see, Diary of a CEO, they do. Have you watched that one?
Is that I get him? Is that Chris Williamson or is that there's another guy that has a very similar? He's from England. He's from England as well.
Yeah,
Got black hair.
I'm forgetting his name, but yeah, that's just a very well produced podcast, and the way they do their opens, the way they close the podcast, the way they ask questions. And I want to point this out really quick. A lot of these highly produced, heavily edited podcasts don't look like they're heavily edited. A lot of people are watching podcasts thinking these are just like raw. This is exactly how the conversation went. That's a lot of times not the case. Like they are cutting out sections, like full sections, or they are taking a section at the end and putting it into the beginning because it was a better, the questions at the end were better than the beginning. So they put those at the beginning and, find a way to make it flow. So also know, like if someone's producing a podcast and you're just doing it yourself and you're just posting raw, I think that's honestly, that's kind of what I like to do. But just know, like, if you really like these really big ones, they are doing heavy editing. But anyway, but you're talking about Chris Williamson, who runs Modern Wisdom.
Yes.
That one is also a very well produced show. And the cool thing is they move around, and they do have like their home studio, but that is for like people that are local, but also if it's not like a huge guest, they'll bring them in. But he spends like $10,000 per episode to produce it. Yeah, it's 10 to probably more, honestly. But they go out and he spends like $20,000-$30,000 per trip to shoot like 2 or 3 episodes, and they do just such a good job. Every little detail is looked at in that one and Diary of a CEO. So honestly, those two, from a production and editing standpoint, those are the two best that I have seen and watched, and I try to emulate those in what we do at the studio. When I give people examples, like I say, hey, look at these. I wish we were producing those, right? But those two are very well done. But I think also look at those as a goal, not as where you want to start with, because you'll like it takes time. Like go watch episode 1. Yeah, it will. But like go watch episode 1 of Modern Wisdom, and you're gonna say, I'm starting at a better spot than them. It like there's humble beginnings from all of them. So just
Well, we'll get there someday. I wanted to ask you, we're coming kind of towards the end, but I want to ask you one kind of question for you. What is one life-changing nugget of wisdom, piece of information, whatever it is, that you personally learned on a podcast specifically that just changed the game for you?
Yeah, I would say, the thing coming to my mind is done is better than perfect. And there's a lot of different ways to say that. And I bet you people have heard that. And it sounds cliche, but just done is better than perfect. Get the podcast started, get the business started, get on the sales call, just knock on the door. It's better to have knocked on the door and try to sell and, knock on 10 doors quickly instead of taking all this time. Like, okay, what exactly am I going to say? How am I going to approach them? What if this happens? Sometimes you just need to jump in and just done is better than being perfect, and it'll get you way further than being perfect well.
Awesome. Skylar, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate this time with you. I feel like I've learned a lot. I think our listeners have learned a lot. Tell the people now how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, you can get in touch with me. Man, I got a lot of different social media pages for the business, but you can just do my personal one. So Skylar Bytendorp, I'm not actively posting on it right now, but that will change soon once we get the podcast back up and running. But at Skylar Bytendorp on any social media channel, you can reach me there. I'm sure we'll have my Instagram down in the show notes, but yeah, if you want more help, reach out to me on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening. This is a Sales Journeyman. Until next time, keep selling, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Skylar.